The 1970s were a golden yet turbulent era for Saturday morning television. Between disco beats and political unrest, kids found escape in vivid worlds of magic, monsters, and morality. But what about the shows that time left behind? Forgotten, overshadowed, or erased, these are the Filmation cartoons of the 1970s you probably never knew existed, until now. Mission, Magic, 1973. When Mission, Magic, hit Saturday mornings in 1973, it carried the star power of Australian pop sensation Rick Springfield. At the time, Springfield was marketed as a teen idol, and Filmation saw an opportunity to blend music with animation. The result? A psychedelic mix of moral lessons, sci-fi adventures, and bubblegum pop songs. Each episode featured Rick magically transported into a fantasy world where he and a group of students solved problems through courage and song. Though ambitious, the series never quite found its audience. The animation was charmingly crude, standard for Filmation's budget constraints, and the storylines often leaned more surreal than sensible. Critics dismissed it as gimmicky, while Springfield himself later admitted he only half remembered making it. Still, the soundtrack stands out, with original songs that gave Rick's music an early international platform. The show disappeared after a single season, remembered mostly by those who stumbled on the LP soundtrack. Today, it feels like a time capsule of a world where cartoons and pop idols merged in ways few dared attempt. Its legacy reminds us of the fleeting magic of television experiments that shine brightly, then vanish almost overnight. The Groovy Ghoulies and Friends, 1972 to 1973, Filmation loved recycling. The Groovy Ghoulies, originally spun off from Sabrina the Teenage Witch, became a cornerstone of Saturday morning oddity. By 1972, Filmation stitched together reruns of The Groovy Ghoulies with segments from other shows to create The Groovy Ghoulies and Friends. It was a Frankenstein's monster of programming, designed to keep costs down and squeeze more life out of earlier productions. Kids tuning in were met with a bizarre lineup, Drac, Frankie, and Wolfie cracking puns one moment, then an unrelated superhero adventure the next. While it baffled critics, children adored the manic pace, never quite knowing what would happen after the next commercial break. Yet its cut-and-paste nature also spelled its downfall. The recycled formula left it forgotten once networks moved toward more coherent shows. Today, it serves as a quirky reminder of how television once stitched together scraps to entertain a restless Saturday morning audience. Lassie's Rescue Rangers, 1973. In 1973, Filmation decided to give America's favorite collie an animated facelift. Lassie's Rescue Rangers transformed the loyal farm dog into the leader of a modern-day environmental rescue squad. Alongside her human family, Lassie helped battle forest fires, poachers, and polluters, reflecting the decades growing environmental concerns. On paper, it sounded wholesome and timely. In practice, the show often felt heavy-handed, with clunky animation and moral lessons delivered like after-school PSAs. Parents praised its educational value, but kids found the action sluggish compared to flashier rivals like Scooby-Doo. Ratings never soared, and the show quietly vanished after one season. Still, it left a mark as one of the earliest eco-conscious cartoons. It captured a cultural shift, where even Saturday morning needed to remind children of their role in protecting the Earth. Forgotten today, it's a relic of Filmation's desire to blend activism with entertainment. My Favorite Martians, 1973. Based on the 1960s sitcom My Favorite Martian, this animated revival landed in 1973 with Filmation's usual mix of ambition and thrift. The cartoon reunited Uncle Martin and Tim O'Hara for interstellar hijinks, but this time with more gadgets, aliens, and zany plots designed to appeal to younger audiences. Unfortunately, it couldn't capture the charm of the original. The humor felt watered down, the animation stiffer than its live-action inspiration, and audiences didn't connect with the characters in their new form. Even Ray Walston, the original Martian, was absent, with new voice actors taking over. The series barely lasted, quickly fading into obscurity. It's remembered now mostly as an odd footnote, a reminder of Filmation's tendency to recycle nostalgic properties in hopes of rekindling past success. For fans, it's a curiosity worth unearthing, though hardly the cultural phenomenon its live-action predecessor had been. Uncle Croc's Block, 1975 to 1976. Perhaps the most infamous entry in Filmation's 1970s experiments, Uncle Croc's Block was a meta-parody of children's television. Hosted by Charles Nelson Riley as the bitter, disgruntled Uncle Croc, the show mocked the very idea of kiddie programming. It blended live-action skits with animated shorts like Freddy Cat and Wacky and Packy. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. Some adults praised its sharp satire, while children were bewildered by its cynical tone. Ratings nosedived, and the show was axed after a single chaotic season. For Filmation, it was a bold swing that backfired spectacularly. Today, Uncle Croc's Block is remembered as a fascinating failure, too smart for kids, too weird for adults. But in its odd way, it foreshadowed the postmodern humor of later decades. Sometimes failure leaves behind the most unforgettable ghosts. The Brady Kids, 1972 to 1974. When Filmation brought the Brady Bunch into animation, expectations were high. The live-action sitcom was a pop-culture juggernaut, and the cartoon spin-off, The Brady Kids, promised to deliver that same family-friendly magic with Saturday morning flair. The series reunited the familiar characters, Greg, Marcia, Jan, Peter, Bobby, and Cindy, but this time they had new companions. Talking animals and a magical bird named Marlin. It was Filmation's attempt to blend the wholesome family sitcom formula with the wacky cartoon antics popular at the time. The Brady Kids sang songs, solved mysteries, and got caught in far-out adventures that veered into the bizarre. Aliens, time travel, and enchanted forests often replaced suburban drama. While it held some charm for die-hard Brady fans, critics argued it cheapened the brand. The animation was rudimentary, the jokes recycled, and many viewers missed the grounded humor of the original series. Ratings were lukewarm, and after 2 seasons, the series quietly disappeared from the airwaves. Today, The Brady Kids is rarely discussed, overshadowed by the enduring legacy of its live-action predecessor. Still, it offers a surreal glimpse into how studios tried to squeeze every ounce of value from hit franchises, even at the risk of straying too far. The New Adventures of Gilligan, 1974 to 1977. Few sitcoms were as beloved as Gilligan's Island, so Filmation saw an opportunity in 1974 to extend the brand for a younger audience. The New Adventures of Gilligan brought back the shipwrecked crew in animated form, with many of the original cast members returning to voice their characters. On paper, it seemed like an instant hit. In execution, however, the charm wore thin. The animation was stiff, and the plots largely recycled sitcom tropes. Gilligan's bumbling, ruined escape attempts, the skipper grew frustrated, and the castaways remained stranded with little hope of rescue. But in cartoon form, the humor lacked the slapstick spontaneity of live action. Children enjoyed the familiarity, but adults found the repetition grating. Critics dismissed it as a pale imitation, and while it lasted 3 seasons, it never matched the cultural impact of its inspiration. Still, it holds a unique place in animation history, proof of how sitcom nostalgia drove Saturday morning programming in the 1970s. Today, it survives only as a curiosity for hardcore Gilligan's Island fans, a forgotten experiment that proved lightning doesn't always strike twice. Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, 1972 to 1985. When Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids premiered in 1972, it broke new ground. Filmation and Bill Cosby aimed to create an educational, socially conscious cartoon rooted in African American culture and everyday struggles. With its mix of humor, music, and moral lessons, the show quickly gained attention for addressing topics children's television usually avoided: poverty, racism, bullying, and honesty. The series became one of Filmation's longest-running and most acclaimed productions. It was praised for diversity in animation at a time when representation was scarce. Kids connected to the Junkyard Gang's relatable misadventures, while parents and educators lauded the positive messaging. Each episode ended with a lesson learned segment, underscoring its educational mission. Yet over time, its cultural footprint dimmed. The simplistic animation aged poorly, and later controversies involving Cosby overshadowed its once groundbreaking role in children's television. Once seen as a proud achievement, it now sits in a strange limbo, honored for its importance, but rarely revisited in today's cultural landscape. Fat Albert remains a reminder of Filmation's rare ability to blend entertainment with social commentary. Forgotten by many, it still deserves recognition as one of the boldest experiments in 1970s Saturday morning history. The New Adventures of Batman, 1977. By 1977, superheroes had stormed television screens, and Filmation jumped on the wave with The New Adventures of Batman. This series was notable for reuniting Adam West and Burt Ward, reprising their iconic roles as Batman and Robin from the 1960s live-action show. Fans were eager to hear familiar voices guiding Gotham's animated crime-fighting adventures. But while the casting sparked excitement, the show itself felt oddly uneven. Filmation's budgetary limitations showed in the choppy animation and repetitive action sequences. The villains, including the Joker, Penguin, and Catwoman, lacked the menace of their comic counterparts, instead rendered in a campy, kid-friendly style. The introduction of Batmite, a mischievous imp who frequently interrupted storylines, frustrated many longtime Batman fans. Despite its flaws, the show managed to capture a younger audience and left an imprint as one of the earliest animated Batman series. It ran only one season, but paved the way for later, more polished adaptations like Batman, the animated series. Today, The New Adventures of Batman is rarely discussed, overshadowed by the darker, more sophisticated takes that followed. Still, it remains a quirky, forgotten bridge between campy 1960s Batman and the grittier hero who emerged in later decades. Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, 1976 to 1980. Filmation's Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, was a rare gem in their 1970s catalog, ambitious, adventurous, and surprisingly faithful to Edgar Rice Burroughs' original novels. Unlike previous Hollywood adaptations that leaned into pulp adventure cliches, this animated series portrayed Tarzan as intelligent, articulate, and deeply connected to the jungle and its people. The show was praised for its maturity and creativity. Each episode featured Tarzan solving problems with cunning rather than brute force, and often introduced fantastical lost civilizations hidden deep in the jungle. The animation was still rough by modern standards, but Filmation's dedication to atmosphere and storytelling gave it a unique gravitas. Though never a mainstream hit, it built a cult following and ran for 4 seasons, longer than most Filmation productions. Its educational tone and respect for its source material set it apart in a decade dominated by gimmicky cartoon experiments. Today, Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, remains an overlooked treasure. While many of Filmation's projects faded into obscurity, Tarzan's animated adventures endure as a rare example of the studio reaching for artistry amid its assembly line output. Forgotten by most, it deserves rediscovery as one of their boldest 1970s efforts. The Secret Lives of Waldo Kitty, 1975 to 1976. In 1975, Filmation took a gamble on blending live-action and animation in The Secret Lives of Waldo Kitty. The concept was clever. Waldo, a timid house cat, retreated into daydreams where he became a larger-than-life animated hero. From swashbucklers to superheroes, his fantasies gave him the courage he lacked in reality. Though imaginative, the show quickly drew controversy. It bore more than a passing resemblance to The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, leading to legal battles with author James Thurber's estate. Filmation rebranded aspects to avoid lawsuits, but the damage was done. Audiences were confused, and the show struggled to find a steady footing. Still, the blend of fantasy, parody, and character-driven humor made it unique in Filmation's lineup. Kids who watched loved Waldo's quirky transformations, but the series lasted just one season. Today, it's a forgotten footnote in the evolution of mixed-media storytelling. Waldo's timid courage speaks to all of us, that our imagination often provides the bravery reality denies. It's a reminder that even short-lived shows can leave behind timeless truths. Ark II, 1976 to 1977. Filmation often blurred the line between cartoons and live action, and Ark II was one of its boldest experiments. Premiering in 1976, it was a live-action science fiction series set in a post-apocalyptic future where a small group of young scientists roamed Earth in a high-tech vehicle trying to restore civilization. Though technically not fully animated, it carried Filmation's signature blend of moral lessons and speculative adventure. With its futuristic RV, jetpacks, and even a talking chimpanzee named Adam, Ark II seemed tailor-made for kids fascinated by sci-fi. Each episode tackled pressing issues, pollution, greed, violence, through stories of rebuilding humanity's future. The production design was surprisingly ambitious given Filmation's tight budgets. Despite its originality, it struggled with uneven storytelling and stiff performances. The apocalyptic tone may have been too heavy for Saturday mornings, and after one season, it was canceled. Yet Ark II has become a cult classic. Its earnest environmental message and unique design live on in nostalgic memory. Though forgotten by most, it was Filmation's daring attempt to prove that children's programming could carry a deeper, almost prophetic weight. Space Academy, 1977. Hot on the heels of Star Wars, Filmation scrambled to tap into the sci-fi boom with Space Academy. This live-action series, heavily marketed as an educational adventure, featured young cadets training in outer space under the command of Jonathan Harris, better known as Dr. Smith, from Lost in Space. The premise was compelling, a futuristic academy teaching teamwork, science, and moral responsibility against the backdrop of interstellar adventures. Special effects were ambitious for the time, with miniatures and sets that evoked big-budget sci-fi films, albeit on a fraction of the cost. However, limitations were obvious. Episodes often recycled stock footage, and the pacing leaned more toward lecture than thrill. Still, children were captivated by the idea of being cadets among the stars, and the show built a modest following. It even inspired a spin-off, Jason, of Star Command. Today, Space Academy is rarely remembered, but in many ways it reflected the optimism of the late 1970s, the belief that science, exploration, and teamwork could guide humanity to the future. Forgotten in syndication, it remains a curious relic of Filmation's starry-eyed ambitions. Tarzan and the Super 7, 1978 to 1980. By the late 1970s, Filmation had found a way to stretch its properties even further, package shows. Tarzan and the Super 7 bundled Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle, with new shorts like The Freedom Force, Webwoman, Superstretch and Microwoman, and Manta and Moray. It was Filmation's way of riding the superhero craze without paying for expensive comic book licenses. Each short offered colorful, if cheaply animated adventures. Webwoman was essentially a gender-swapped Spider-Man clone, while the Freedom Force gathered mythological heroes like Hercules and Merlin into a Saturday morning team-up. The show thrived on variety, though consistency suffered. Critics mocked its bargain bin superheroes, but for children, it was a weekly thrill ride. The package format gave them a sampler of adventure genres in one sitting. Still, without a breakout star, it faded from memory once networks demanded fresher programming. Today, Tarzan and the Super 7 is remembered fondly only by those who grew up watching it. It serves as a reminder of Filmation's knack for recycling ideas, repackaging them into something new, and squeezing every ounce of possibility out of Saturday mornings. ISIS, 1975 to 1977. Filmation took inspiration from ancient mythology with The Secrets of Isis, one of television's first live-action superheroines. High school science teacher Andrea Thomas discovered an amulet granting her the powers of the Egyptian goddess Isis. With flight, super strength, and the ability to command nature, she fought villains and taught moral lessons. Debuting in 1975, Isis was groundbreaking, predating Wonder Woman's live-action debut by a year. Portrayed by Joanna Cameron, the character quickly became a role model for young girls, proving superheroes weren't just for men. Each episode carried a clear message about honesty, courage, or responsibility, ending with a reflective moral segment. Despite its significance, Isis faded into obscurity. Syndication rarely resurfaced it, and its connection to DC Comics, which later adopted the character, was overlooked. Still, it paved the way for future heroines on screen. Forgotten today, Isis remains a pioneering milestone. Long before Hollywood embraced female superheroes, Filmation gave Saturday morning audiences a goddess with the power to inspire. Its legacy is quiet but profound, a reminder that sometimes history's trailblazers vanish from memory, even as their influence endures. Jason of Star Command, 1978 to 1981, writing the success of Space Academy, Filmation launched Jason of Star Command in 1978, hoping to ride the Star Wars wave. Set in the same universe as Space Academy, the series followed Jason, a daring space adventurer, on serialized missions against galactic villains. The show was notable for its cliffhanger endings and action-packed pacing, rare for Saturday morning. Production values were surprisingly ambitious. Miniature spacecraft, laser battles, and exotic alien planets gave it a cinematic feel, though all crafted on Filmation's famously tight budgets. Jonathan Harris's absence was filled by James Doohan of Star Trek fame, though his role was later recast due to scheduling conflicts. Audiences enjoyed the pulpy action, and it became one of Filmation's longest-running live-action shows, lasting 3 seasons. Yet as sci-fi grew darker and more sophisticated, Jason of Star Command faded into nostalgia. Today, it's remembered fondly as Filmation's scrappy answer to Star Wars, offering children a low-budget but thrilling gateway into science fiction adventure. Freddy Cat, 1975. Debuting within Uncle Croc's block, Freddy Cat was a short-lived Filmation cartoon with a macabre sense of humor. The premise centered on Freddy, a hapless feline haunted by 9 ghostly incarnations of his past lives. Each spirit appeared when Freddy accidentally called their number. 1 summoned a saber-toothed tiger, 2 a medieval cat, and so on. The darkly comic setup was clever, but its association with the ill-fated Uncle Croc's block doomed it. Critics panned the overarching show, and Freddy Cat went down with it after just 1 season. Some parents also found its spooky undertones too unsettling for younger viewers. Yet Freddy Cat developed a cult following. Its gallows humor and inventive concept set it apart from Filmation's typically wholesome lineup. Decades later, animation fans still seek out its rare episodes online, fascinated by its strange mix of comedy and gothic charm. Forgotten by most, it remains one of Filmation's boldest creative risks. Webwoman, 1978 to 1980. Introduced within Tarzan and the Super 7, Webwoman was Filmation's answer to Marvel's Spider-Man, only with a female twist. Christine, a NASA scientist, was granted powers by an alien and became Webwoman, wielding insect-inspired gadgets and web-like powers to battle villains threatening Earth. The concept was undeniably derivative, but for young viewers it was thrilling to see a woman in the superhero spotlight. Unlike many contemporaries, Webwoman was portrayed as intelligent, resourceful, and independent, a refreshing change from the damsel-in-distress archetype still common in the 1970s. Unfortunately, her adventures were short-lived. Limited animation, repetitive storylines, and the lack of broader comic book tie-ins meant she never achieved mainstream recognition. With only a handful of episodes produced, she faded quickly once the package series ended. Still, Webwoman holds historical value. She predates many female superheroes in animation and reflects Filmation's quiet experimentation with inclusivity. Forgotten today, she deserves recognition as one of television's earliest attempts at putting a female hero in charge of her own destiny. Manta and Moray, 1978 to 1980. Also part of Tarzan and the Super 7, Manta and Moray explored the mysteries of the deep sea. The series followed two oceanic superheroes, Manta, a man of the sea, and Moray, his human ally, who battled threats ranging from undersea tyrants to pollution. With its aquatic setting, the show stood out from the countless landlocked cartoons of its era. The animation was crude, but the premise tapped into 1970s environmental concerns. Each episode emphasized protecting marine life and combating human greed beneath the waves. Kids were captivated by the strange underwater worlds and creatures, even if critics dismissed it as simplistic. Though quickly forgotten, it holds an odd place in Saturday morning history as one of the earliest eco-conscious underwater superhero shows. In hindsight, Manta and Moray reflected the era's anxieties about pollution while offering children fantastical adventures below the sea. The Freedom Force, 1978 to 1979. Another segment within Tarzan and the Super 7, the Freedom Force, was Filmation's stab at creating a superhero team. Featuring Hercules, Isis, Sinbad, Merlin, and Super Samurai, the group fought evil across time and space. It was Filmation's attempt to cash in on the team-up trend popularized by comics like Justice League. The idea was ambitious, but the execution fell flat. With only 5 episodes produced, the series never had time to build momentum. The mix of mythological and original characters felt random, and the limited animation drained the action of excitement. Kids enjoyed the novelty, but it couldn't compete with flashier superhero content from rivals like Hanna-Barbera. Still, the Freedom Force is notable as one of the first animated attempts to blend myth, magic, and superheroes into a single squad. Forgotten by most, it was a bold but fleeting experiment, a reminder of how Filmation constantly searched for lightning in a bottle, even if it rarely struck. Superstretch and Microwoman, 1978 to 1980. Within Tarzan and the Super 7 lived one of Filmation's strangest creations, Superstretch and Microwoman. This superhero husband and wife duo had powers inspired by elasticity and size shifting. Superstretch could contort his body into wild forms, while Microwoman shrank to insect size to infiltrate tight spaces. Together, they solved crimes, often with the help of their loyal dog, Trouble. The concept was progressive for its time, a married couple presented as equals, fighting side by side. Unlike many superhero teams, their relationship was built on partnership and affection, offering children a rare glimpse of teamwork between male and female heroes, without one overshadowing the other. But the execution was hampered by Filmation's trademark shortcuts: stiff animation, repetitive villains, and predictable storylines. Despite its uniqueness, it never caught on with wider audiences. With only a small handful of episodes produced, the series vanished quickly from the Saturday morning lineup. Today, it's remembered as both quirky and quietly groundbreaking. While forgotten by most, Superstretch and Microwoman hinted at possibilities for diverse superhero storytelling long before mainstream studios embraced them. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jeckle, 1979 to 1980. By the late 1970s, Filmation sought to revive classic cartoon icons. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jeckle attempted to bring back Terry-Toons stars for a new generation. Pairing the superhero mouse with the wisecracking magpies, the series leaned heavily on nostalgia while trying to update humor for contemporary kids. Initially, the combination generated excitement. Mighty Mouse represented wholesome heroics, while Heckle and Jeckle added slapstick wit. But the tonal clash left the show unfocused. The humor felt dated, the animation crude, and the magic of the original shorts proved hard to recapture. Critics weren't impressed, but some kids delighted in seeing these characters on TV again. Still, the show failed to reach the cultural heights of its predecessors and was canceled after just one season. Today, it exists largely as an odd attempt at revival, proving that even iconic characters can fade when not adapted carefully. Forgotten by mainstream audiences, it serves as a cautionary tale of how nostalgia alone can't sustain success. Zorro. The animated series, 1975 to 1978, Filmation brought swashbuckling legend Zorro into animated form in the mid-1970s. Zorro. The animated series followed Don Diego de la Vega, who, disguised as the masked vigilante, defended the oppressed against corrupt officials in Spanish California. Unlike many Filmation shows, this series balanced action, history, and morality with surprising care. The animation was still limited, but the storytelling carried weight. Episodes tackled themes of justice, fairness, and courage, values deeply tied to Zorro's legacy. Children were enthralled by sword fights and daring rescues, while parents appreciated the moral backbone of the series. Despite positive reception, it was overshadowed by flashier superhero cartoons of the era. Ratings lagged, and after 3 years, it quietly disappeared from schedules. Yet for many who grew up watching, it instilled an enduring admiration for the masked hero. Today, it's one of Filmation's more dignified efforts, forgotten by history, but still worthy of recognition as a noble attempt to preserve a timeless legend for a younger generation. The Ghostbusters, 1975. Long before the blockbuster film, Filmation produced its own Ghostbusters in 1975. This live-action comedy series starred Forrest Tucker and Larry Storch as bumbling ghost hunters aided by a gorilla named Tracy. Each week, the team tackled bizarre supernatural foes with slapstick humor and low-budget effects. Though short-lived, it left a peculiar mark. When Columbia Pictures later developed its 1984 Ghostbusters, Filmation owned the rights to the name. The studio produced an animated spin-off, Filmation's Ghostbusters, in the 1980s to capitalize on the film's success, sparking confusion among audiences. The original 1975 show itself was quickly forgotten, overshadowed by the movie juggernaut that followed. Yet it remains a fascinating artifact, a quirky blend of comedy and horror that, by sheer coincidence, secured Filmation's place in a later cultural phenomenon. Today, it's remembered mostly by collectors and historians, a reminder of how chance and timing can change entertainment history forever. BraveStarr, late 1970s concept, 1980s release roots. Though BraveStarr officially premiered in the late 1980s, its roots trace back to Filmation's late 1970s experimentation. The studio conceived it as a futuristic western featuring Marshall BraveStarr, a Native American hero who defended the planet New Texas with powers of animal spirit strength. Early development sketches and concepts circulated in the late 70s, planting the seeds for what would become Filmation's swan song. At the time, the concept was daring, melding Western tropes with sci-fi, diversity, and moral lessons about greed, justice, and community. But Filmation shelved it temporarily, waiting for the right cultural moment. When it finally launched in the 80s, it carried the DNA of the 1970s, moral-heavy storytelling, bold experimentation, and Filmation's willingness to defy norms. Though technically beyond the 70s, its conception in that decade makes it the culmination of Filmation's forgotten experiments. BraveStarr symbolized both the ambition and fragility of a studio that constantly reached for greatness, even when budgets and timing failed them. Forgotten in mainstream culture, BraveStarr remains the ultimate reflection of Filmation's daring spirit, a bridge between Saturday morning simplicity and bigger, bolder ideas. Filmation's forgotten cartoons of the 1970s remind us of an era where imagination soared, even when budgets grounded it. Some failed, some inspired, but all shaped childhoods in their own way. Which one do you remember most? Like, subscribe, and share your favorite forgotten gem in the comments below.